I heard the wine glass shatter before I heard my mother say the words that would change everything. "Karen, honey, maybe just, don't mention your little hobby tonight." We were standing in the kitchen of my parents' country club venue, the one they'd rented out for my brother Derek's engagement party. My mother was arranging champagne flutes on a silver tray, and she didn't even look at me when she said it. Like the comment was so casual, so obvious, it didn't require eye contact. My little hobby. That's what she called the business I'd built from nothing. The consulting firm that had gone from my laptop at a coffee shop to a 6-person team with corporate clients across 3 states. But to my family, it was invisible. To them, Derek, with his finance job and his corner office, and his fiancée, who ran a boutique PR firm in Manhattan, he was the success story. I was just Karen. The one who had tried things. The one who worked from home in sweatpants. The one they seated at the kids' table until I was 28. I picked up the pieces of broken glass from the floor without saying a word. "Good," my mother said, smoothing her dress. "Tonight is about Derek and Sophie. Let's keep it that way. If you've ever been the invisible one in your family, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. You're going to want to see how this ends." The party started at 7. 200 guests. String quartet. Past hors d'oeuvres that probably cost more than my monthly office rent. My father stood at the entrance greeting people like a campaign manager, and my brother Derek worked the room in a tailored navy suit that looked like it cost 4 figures. And Sophie, his fiancée, she floated through the crowd in a cream silk dress, laughing that perfectly practiced laugh, the one that made everyone lean in closer. I'd met Sophie exactly 3 times before tonight. Once at a family brunch where she mostly talked about her PR firm's client list. Once at Derek's birthday dinner where she spent 20 minutes on a work call. And once at a coffee shop, accidentally, where we'd actually really talked about business, about strategy, about what it takes to build something real. That last conversation had felt different. But tonight, I was back to being background noise. I found my seat at table 9. Not the family table. Not even close. I was seated with my cousin's boyfriend's sister and a few people I'd never met. My mother walked past, saw me sitting there, and didn't even pause. Derek stood to give a speech. He talked about finding Sophie, about building a life together, about how grateful he was for family support. My parents beamed. The crowd applauded. No one looked at me. I sipped my champagne and told myself it didn't matter. That I was used to this. That I'd stopped needing their validation years ago. But then my father stood up. "I want to say something about my son," my father began, his voice warm and proud in that way it only ever was when he talked about Derek. When Derek was young, I knew he'd do something special. He had drive. Ambition. He didn't waste time on pipe dreams, he went after what was real. My stomach tightened. And now, watching him with Sophie, seeing him build this beautiful future. I couldn't be prouder. Derek represents everything this family stands for. Hard work. Real success. Results. The room erupted in applause. My father raised his glass. To Derek and Sophie. To the life they're going to build. To the legacy they're going to create. I felt my face go hot. My hands shook as I set down my glass. Real success. Results. As if I hadn't spent 3 years building something from scratch. As if I hadn't worked 16-hour days to land my first major client. As if I didn't have a waiting list of companies who wanted to hire me. But I was at table 9. And Derek was the legacy. I excused myself to the bathroom and locked the door. I stared at my reflection in the oversized mirror, the girl who'd always been second place, always been dismissed, always been told she wasn't quite enough. I almost left right then. But when I walked back out into the hallway, Sophie was standing there. "Karen," Sophie said softly. She was leaning against the wall near the ladies' room, holding a glass of champagne and looking tired. "Can we talk for a second?" I nodded, cautious. She glanced down the hallway to make sure we were alone, then looked at me with something that almost resembled guilt. "I need to tell you something," she said. "And I don't know if I should, but I think I have to." My pulse quickened. "I know what your family thinks of you," Sophie continued. "Derek's told me things. Your mom's made comments. They think you're just dabbling. Playing at business while Derek's doing the real work." I swallowed hard. Hearing it out loud stung worse than I expected. "But here's the thing," Sophie said, and her voice dropped lower. "I know who you are. I know what you've built. And Karen, you saved my company." I blinked. "What?" Sophie set her glass down on a side table and ran a hand through her hair. "That conversation we had at the coffee shop 6 months ago? When you gave me that advice about restructuring my client intake process and reworking my pitch decks?" I remembered. We'd talked for almost 2 hours. She'd been stressed about losing clients and struggling to scale, and I'd walked her through some frameworks I used. It was just conversation. "I implemented everything you told me," Sophie said. "Every single thing. And Karen, my revenue tripled. I went from barely keeping the lights on to signing my 3 biggest clients ever. I hired 4 new people. I'm opening a second office in Boston next month." My breath caught. "You did that," she said firmly. "Not me. I mean, I executed it, but the strategy, the foundation, that was you." I stood there in that hallway, staring at Sophie, and something inside me shifted. Not anger. Not yet. Just clarity. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked quietly. Sophie looked toward the ballroom, where music and laughter echoed down the hall. "Because they don't see you. And I think it's time they did." "Sophie." "I'm going to tell them," she said. "Tonight." During my speech. My heart slammed against my ribs. "You don't have to do that." "Yes," she said, meeting my eyes. "I do." She picked up her champagne glass and walked back toward the party. I stood there alone for a long moment, my mind racing. Part of me wanted to stop her. Part of me wanted to disappear. And part of me, the part that had been silent for too long, wanted to watch what happened next. I walked back into the ballroom just as Sophie took the microphone. Sophie stood at the front of the room, smiling that gracious smile everyone loved. Derek sat beside her, relaxed and proud. My parents watched from the head table, my mother dabbing at happy tears. "Thank you all so much for being here tonight," Sophie began. "This has been the most beautiful evening, and I'm so grateful to celebrate with all of you." The crowd murmured appreciation. "I want to talk about success for a minute," Sophie continued, and something in her tone shifted. "Because I think we throw that word around a lot without really understanding what it means." Derek glanced up at her, slightly confused. "A year ago, my business was failing," Sophie said bluntly. "I was losing clients. I was drowning in work I couldn't manage. I was about to shut everything down and go work for someone else." The room went quiet. "And then I met someone who changed everything," Sophie said. She turned and looked directly at me. "Karen Brennan, Derek's sister, sat down with me at a coffee shop and spent 2 hours teaching me how to save my company. I felt every eye in the room turn toward me. She didn't charge me, Sophie continued. She didn't ask for anything. She just gave me the exact frameworks I needed to turn everything around. And because of her, my revenue tripled. I hired a team. I'm expanding to a second city. Everything I have now, the success everyone's been congratulating me on tonight, it started with Karen. My mother's face had gone pale. My father sat frozen, his champagne glass halfway to his mouth. Derek looked between Sophie and me, utterly lost. So I want to say this publicly, Sophie said, her voice clear and firm. Karen isn't playing at business. She's not dabbling. She's a founder. She's a strategist. And she's the reason I'm standing here tonight with a company worth celebrating. Sophie raised her glass toward me. To Karen. The person this family should be toasting. For 3 long seconds, nobody moved. Then someone at a back table started clapping. Then another person. Then a ripple of applause spread through the room until half the guests were clapping, smiling at me with newfound curiosity. But my family's table stayed silent. My mother stared down at her plate. My father's jaw was tight. Derek looked at Sophie like she just set fire to his carefully curated evening. Sophie walked over to me and handed me her champagne glass. You deserve to be seen, she whispered. I took the glass with shaking hands. The rest of the party passed in a blur. People I'd never spoken to came up to ask about my business. A woman handed me her card and asked if I did consulting for marketing firms. A man wanted to introduce me to his daughter who was starting a non-profit. But my parents didn't speak to me. Not once. At the end of the night, as guests filtered out, my mother pulled Sophie aside near the coat check. I was close enough to hear her hiss, that was completely inappropriate. This night was about Derek. Sophie's voice was calm. This night was about celebrating success. And Karen's success deserves to be acknowledged. She's never been serious about her work, my mother snapped. With all due respect, Sophie said quietly, you have no idea what your daughter has built. If you've ever had someone finally see your worth when your own family couldn't, hit that subscribe button. Because we're about to get to the part where everything shifts. I woke up the next morning to 17 missed calls. 6 from my mother. 4 from my father. 7 from Derek. I ignored all of them and made coffee. Around noon, Derek showed up at my apartment. I almost didn't open the door, but he kept knocking, so I finally let him in. What the hell was that last night? He demanded, still in yesterday's dress shirt, rumpled and exhausted. That, I said calmly, was your fiancée telling the truth. You made her do that. You put her up to it. I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. I didn't even know she was going to say anything, Derek. She did that on her own because apparently she has more respect for what I do than my own family. You're being dramatic, Derek said, but his voice had lost its edge. Am I? I set down my coffee mug and looked at him. When was the last time Mom or Dad asked about my business? When was the last time they introduced me as anything other than our daughter who works from home? When was the last time I got seated at the family table? Derek opened his mouth, then closed it. I've been building something real for 3 years, I said quietly. And you all treated it like a phase. Like I was waiting to grow up and get a real job. Meanwhile, I've been consulting for companies you'd recognize, Derek. I've been generating revenue you'd respect. But none of you ever asked. We didn't know. Because you didn't care to know. Derek sank onto my couch, and for the first time in my life, he looked small. Sophie's furious with me, he said finally. She said I've been blind. That I've let mom and dad treat you like you're invisible. You have. He rubbed his face. What do you want me to do, Karen? I thought about that for a long moment. I want you to see me, I said. Really see me. Not as the little sister who couldn't quite measure up, but as someone who built something worth respecting. 3 days later, my father called. Your mother and I would like you to come to dinner, he said stiffly. We need to talk. I almost said no. Almost told him I was busy. Almost let them sit with their discomfort a little longer. But I went. They lived in the same sprawling suburban house I'd grown up in, the one with the dining room that seated 12 and the walls covered in photos of Derek's achievements. My college graduation photo was on a side table in the hallway, half hidden behind a plant. We sat in the formal dining room. My mother had made pot roast, which she only did for important occasions. So, my father began, cutting into his food with precise movements. Sophie spoke to us this week. I waited. She explained the extent of what you do. The clients you work with. The revenue you've generated. He paused, and I could see how much it cost him to continue. We didn't realize the scope of your work. Because you never asked, I said simply. My mother flinched. We thought you were. She trailed off, searching for words. We thought you were still figuring things out. I figured it out 3 years ago, I said. You just weren't paying attention. The silence stretched long and uncomfortable. We're proud of you, my father said finally. But the words sounded hollow, rehearsed. Are you? I asked. Or are you just embarrassed that Sophie had to tell a room full of people what you should have already known? My mother's eyes filled with tears. That's not fair, Karen. What's not fair, I said, and my voice was steady now, clear, is that I spent years trying to earn your approval. Years working twice as hard as Derek just to get half the recognition. Years being invisible at my own family's table. We never meant. It doesn't matter what you meant, I said. It matters what you did. And what you did was make me feel like I wasn't enough. Like I'd always be the one who couldn't quite measure up to your golden child. I stood up. But here's what I know now, I continued. I don't need your approval anymore. I built something real. I help people build their dreams. And I'm good at it, really good at it. Sophie knew that after one conversation. It took you 30 years and a public speech to even consider it. I picked up my purse. I'll come to family dinners when I'm ready, I said. But I'm done performing for your validation. I'm done trying to prove I'm worth your attention. I walked out, leaving my pot roast untouched on the table. 6 weeks passed. Derek and Sophie postponed their wedding, not because of me, Sophie clarified over coffee, but because they needed to work through some things. Apparently, my brother had some reflecting to do about how he treated the people in his life. My mother started texting me articles about female entrepreneurs. Awkward, stilted attempts at connection that felt like apologies she couldn't quite say out loud. My father sent an email asking if I'd be willing to meet for lunch. Just to talk, he wrote. No agenda. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I focused on my work. I signed 2 new clients. I hired another team member. I raised my rates. And I realized something, I didn't need them to fix this. I didn't need a grand apology or a tearful reconciliation scene. What I needed was to build a life where their opinions no longer defined my worth. Sophie became a real friend. We met for coffee every week, and she introduced me to other women building companies. My network grew. My reputation grew. And slowly, quietly, I stopped waiting for my family to see me. Because I already saw myself. Eventually, I did meet my father for lunch. We sat in a downtown cafe, and he looked older somehow. Tired. I've been thinking about that dinner, he said. About what you said. I sipped my tea and waited. You were right, he said quietly. We didn't see you. We didn't ask. We made assumptions, and we were wrong. I nodded. I don't know how to fix it, he admitted. But I'd like to try. Then start by asking, I said. Ask me about my work. Ask me about my clients. Ask me what I'm building and why it matters to me. Don't just assume you already know. He nodded, and for the first time in years, he asked real questions. He listened. He even took notes on a napkin. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a Hollywood ending where everything was instantly healed. But it was a beginning. Here's what I learned: you can't force people to see you. You can't perform or achieve or prove your way into their respect. Either they choose to value you, or they don't. And if they don't, you have a choice. You can keep waiting for them to wake up, or you can build a life that doesn't require their approval. I chose the second option. My family is still figuring out how to see me clearly. Some days are better than others. Derek and I talk now, real conversations, not just small talk. My mother tries, in her own complicated way. But I don't need them to validate me anymore. Because I know what I've built. I know what I'm worth. And I know that the girl who used to sit at table 9, the invisible one, the one they called a failure, she built something real. She built a business that helps other people succeed. She built friendships based on mutual respect. She built a life where her value isn't determined by other people's limited vision. And that, more than any family speech or public recognition, is what real success looks like. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been underestimated by the people who should have believed in you first, leave a comment below and tell me your story. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button because there are more stories like this coming. Stories about people who built themselves up when the world tried to keep them small. Thanks for listening. I'll see you in the next one.